today's episode, we'll be exploring the question, how do you deal with and overcome trauma, including PTSD, also known as post-traumatic disorder. While trauma can occur in varying forms, the method for dealing with and overcoming trauma focuses on one key issue, what you choose. This was the case for my guest today, Keyosha Duarte, who chose to heal and move on from her own personal experiences with trauma. In doing so, she was able to transform from a place of depression and even thoughts of suicide to live a life where she is now thriving. As she likes to say, she went from a victim mentality to a victor mentality. How can you do this in your life? How can you bounce back and move beyond your trauma to a place of empowerment? Kiyosha will tell us exactly what she did and how you too can bounce back in your life. Trauma does not have to define you. And in today's episode, we'll explore how you can use the lessons from Kiyosha's life to overcome your own trauma, no matter how small or large. We'll take an in-depth look at Kiyosha's experience, including her book, The Journey to Recovery, and what steps she has outlined for dealing with and overcoming trauma. Kiyosha is now a trauma recovery coach and is using her experience to help others move on from their own personal experiences with trauma. She is a wife and mother and currently resides in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hi, everyone. And as always, this is Coach Brad, your host, and the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast. And today on the podcast, we've got Keyosha coming to us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Keyosha, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Bray. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you on today because you've got a very, very important topic. And as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to discuss today about trauma and how to overcome trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or adult trauma. I know a lot of us experience trauma in our lives, and trauma doesn't always, I should say, trauma can come in many different forms. We commonly in society today hear about post-traumatic stress disorder as it pertains to military experience or something like that, which is very true. But post-traumatic stress disorder can come in a wide variety of forms: a divorce, a car accident, a childhood experience, something like that. And so I know you're an expert in this area for that could be a good thing, meaning that you've had this experience, but you've gone through the experience and now you're able to share what you've learned with others. So tell us today, how does someone deal with trauma? How do we overcome trauma? I know you've dealt with this in your life. How were you able to overcome trauma and transform?
Bray, there came a time in my life where I had a victim mentality because of everything that happened to me. And then it was only when my daughter was born, today she's 6 years old, when as she started growing, and I started seeing a similar pattern in her of having a victim mentality. That's when I had a wake-up call and I decided, you know what, I need to change my thinking towards my outlook on life and my experiences, because the fact of the matter remains, we cannot change the past, and holding on to it only causes more damage than anything else. So that's where my journey began, when I had a wake-up call and I said, no, I'm changing my mindset. And that's where it started for me.
And then even prior to that, at one point in your journey, you were suicidal and even very depressed.
Yes, I was. It was actually exactly after the birth of my daughter. I think I was at my most vulnerable during that time because my partner, my husband, wasn't very supportive. So I felt alone, and growing up without a mother and having an absent father at the same time, it was really difficult for me to adjust now, being married and having a daughter and having a husband that's not emotional supportive in any way or form. So I felt very depressed and very alone. And as I told you, that victim mentality really kicked in, and it was very difficult for me to deal with at the time.
I can imagine that. And I remember also reading part of your story, something you just mentioned too. You kind of had this wake up call. Something you said in your story was
Yes.
very powerful. You said that healing is a choice. What did you mean by that?
Healing is a choice because that's what I've realized. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague of mine one day, and then, she just said to me, "My girl, you need to pull up your socks now. You have a daughter, you need to be strong, you need to be brave." And then I thought to myself, you know what? It is possible. So I had to push myself, and it wasn't an overnight thing. I didn't just wake up and realize, oh, yeah, it was a process. Once I came to the realization that the victim mentality had to fall, it was a process for me. It was a day in, day out process for me to remind myself that, you know what, you are not your past. You are not the things that happened to you. So where is it that you see yourself? What example do you want to set for your daughter? What kind of a wife do you want to be? What kind of a friend do you want to be? What kind of a colleague do you want to be? So that's where it all started for me, to just be sure that, I really want to be a happier version of myself, achieving my goals bit by bit and being the happiest person that I possibly can be.
And so, what were some of the steps kind of as you were coming out of this, switching from, you just mentioned a victim mentality to, I would say, you're a victor mentality now? What were kind of some of the steps that you had to go through?
Okay, one of the things definitely for me was that, I did introspection. So I also did mirror work. I did a lot of mirror work because I relied so much on external forces to make me feel good, to validate who I am, that I no longer relied on people's compliments. I was no longer people pleasing. I focused on what I can do and how best I can do it. I focused on my good traits more than the things that I'm not very good at. So that is stuff that really helped me a lot. I started exercising, I started eating healthier, I started reading more. And when I looked at the goals that I wanted to achieve, I realized that it's far from the person that I was then. So I completely transformed from being the person that was always self pitying, just watching TV, not having a vision for my life, not having a goal for my life, and just complaining about my husband. In actual fact, now I don't even have the time to complain about my husband because I'm so busy with a whole lot of things, So I just shifted my energies to more positive things and things that I have control over. That's what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a lot of people listening right now, Keyosha, who are struggling with trauma or overcoming trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder. What would you
Mhm.
tell those people? Like, what's the first thing they can do to begin transforming their life like you did?
The number one thing I would definitely say is that in any form of trauma,
Are you still there, Keyosha? I think we might have lost you.
can you hear me?
Yep, yep. Okay, you're back.
Oh,
Yep,
oh,
no
awesome.
problem. Keep
Okay.
going.
It's just a bit of a network. So, as I was explaining that, it is not the event that causes the trauma, but how we react to the event or the situation
Ah,
that happens to us that causes the trauma in any situation.
oh, okay.
So the first thing that I would definitely say is not to relive the trauma, because it is in reliving the experience that we cannot move forward from it. And also to make them understand that with any form of trauma, it's also emotional needs that were not met in the process, whether it be as a child or whether it be as an adult. It's emotional needs that were not met. So I would say that instead of relying on external factors to feed the person that you are, rely on your inner strengths and your inner ability to look forward to what you want to be in life.
And you just hit on a key point, look to your inner strengths. It's an inner journey.
Yes.
So many folks, I think, I've interviewed a lot of people now for this podcast, and we kind of all say the same thing, look for the inner strengths.
Mhm.
It's an inner journey. It's an inside job. And I
Yes.
think so many folks are looking on the outside still. That's
Mhm.
why the books don't work, the self-help books or the yoga or whatever, or personal seminars that people go to don't necessarily work because they're still looking on the inside, or excuse me, they're still looking on the outside when they
From the
should be
outside.
looking
Hmm.
on the inside. And so, Keyosha, I know you've written a book now about trauma and dealing with trauma. Tell us a little bit what your book is called and a little bit about it.
The book, the pages, it's called The Journey to Recovery. And I was very excited about the book because in the book, I also mentioned a short journey about a friend of mine who then eventually became my client, what he experienced and how I was able to help him. And then there's also steps that you can take, to help you to overcome your internal fears that you have surrounding your trauma, and also to boost your confidence as an individual, as a person, to become that alpha male, alpha female that you
Yeah.
really want to be, the people that you admire. There's some steps that I've put in there so that you can become that person. So that is why this particular book is so special to me, and also because it's the very first one that I've written, and I'm so excited for what is to come from it. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, we'll definitely put a link to that in the podcast notes. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about what some of those steps are you just mentioned?
Yes, the few of the steps that I've mentioned, there's definitely the eating healthy, definitely the sleeping more, definitely drinking a lot more water, and then there's some steps to boost your self-confidence, dress up, put on some perfume,
Oh,
smell
yeah.
good, yeah, some of those steps that I put in there. And then there's some surprises in the book as well. So yeah, and it's free right now. I'm not charging anything for it, and I'd love to share it for free.
Okay, well, we'll definitely get that in the podcast notes. Kyosha, as you were kind of transforming from, I guess I like to call it the person you were to the person you are now, that transformation from your point A to your point B, was this? I know it wasn't an overnight journey, but
Mhm.
a year, 2 years, 3 years? How long would you say before you kind of came out on the other side?
For me, it was a journey of since 2017. So it was how many years? 5 years. It was a 5-year journey for me.
Okay.
When my daughter started speaking, and she started throwing tantrums for absolutely nothing and no reason, and she started emotionally blackmailing me, crying for anything, then
They're
I
smart.
realized, you know what? Yes, very kids are very clever. We tend to underestimate them. And I thought to myself, am I a contributing factor to this behavior? And I said, no ways, I'm changing it. I'm changing it. So it's been a 5-year journey for me, and I'm proud to say that, I'm not there yet, but I will keep on striving. I'll just keep on striving,
Yeah,
and
and
hopefully
again,
to allow someone to draw strength from that as well.
and again, for anyone listening, Kyosha just mentioned 5 years. For me, it's been 13 years. So you're way ahead of me.
Wow. Wow.
Been on this journey for 13 years and still in the process of transforming myself. So I know a lot of people get caught up in this 90-day quick fix or 21-day
No,
quick fix thing, but that the reality is it just doesn't work that way.
it doesn't.
Transformation and overcoming trauma, particularly PTSD type trauma, it takes a while. So you got to be
It
patient
takes
with yourself.
time. Yes, and one of the first steps when it comes to trauma is definitely, to admit and accept the things that happen to you, because many times people are in denial. So trying to help them becomes more difficult for the coach or the therapist. And also, one thing that people need to understand, that as coaches, we are not therapists. I always say that as a coach, I do know my limits. I also refer my clients to therapists or to psychologists, depending on the situation, because I do not want to cause any harm to my clients. For me, your healing and your journey is more important than money, than anything in the world. So I will not push my own agenda in any way or form. The health of my client is more important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And during your journey, Kyosha, was there any time where you like, I don't know, wanted to quit or give up or you lost motivation or something like that? And if so, how did you kind of keep going the next day?
It happened a lot, especially in the first two, three
Me too.
years where I would become so demotivated. I would even question myself, girl, are you on the right track? Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes I would even feel like giving up because I'm like, nah, maybe that's not meant for you. You at it again. And I found myself looking at this and that and the other to try and get that fulfillment, just to try and see that, can I do this? Can I do that? And eventually I decided, you know what? I'm not going to go look for all kinds of things to fill the inner void that I have. And that is the thing that will make you depressed because we are not good at everything. It's impossible for us to be good at everything. So I decided to focus on the things that I actually can do, the things that I'm actually good at, and it worked for me quite well. I'm telling you. I'm not saying that, I will not get those days anymore going forward, but I know that I can handle it much better. And in the process, I've also learned a lot about emotional intelligence. I feel that, I've lacked emotional intelligence in the past. So now that I am more aware of it, it really helped me a lot.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Emotional intelligence. I've not heard of that before. What is that exactly? And how do you, I guess, become more aware of it or gain control over it, I guess?
Okay, let me just give you a brief background, right? With the
Okay.
work that I do, I'm also working at the local municipality, right? So I'm a shop steward. I work with the unions, right?
Okay.
So during the mediation processes, people tend to act out of emotion. They tend to act out of anger, because a lot of the times you find that especially people with trauma suffer from, they have a whole lot of triggers. There's a lot of things that can trigger you, and for each and every person it's different, right? So with emotional intelligence, you start to recognize what your triggers are and how you choose to react to it. Yes, and what you choose to do about it. So you don't act out of anger anymore. You don't act out of how you feel at that present moment, but instead you try to look at a reasonable solution, and that is what emotional intelligence is all about.
Wow, that's great. I've never actually heard that. So how are you doing today then? Like how would you compare your life now to 5 years ago?
Brad, I would definitely say that I am at a much better space. I'm more at peace. I accept life as it is and change the things that I can. And for me, what makes it so special for me is that I'm a happier mom. And being a happier mom means having a happy child. And when I see my daughter glowing and being the best version of herself at the age of 6 years old, means that definitely I'm doing something right. And that is the thing that keeps me going each and every single day.
Oh yeah, that's powerful. Having your daughter there to help keep you going in the morning. Uh,
Yes, definitely.
yeah, so if someone comes to you that has experienced trauma, what are kind of some of the steps you do with them to help get them going the other side to help transform?
Okay, so the first step that I take is to tell them that, we are not going to reflect on the things that happened to you. I usually give them a question and ask them, where do you see yourself in a month's time? Where do you see yourself in a year's time? So based on what they are saying, then I can see more or less where the client wants to go, and then we just work around it. I also do a lot of mirror work with them. They also have to do a lot of journaling in the process, and then we
Oh,
also celebrate achievements from little things that they, many times you find that people are so depressed they can't even take a bath, for instance. If I have a session and they're like, what, for the first time in 3 days, I managed to have a bath. It's a celebration, it's an achievement, you know. So that is the processes that I follow. I don't necessarily have specific techniques because I've realized that, yes, in as much as there's many techniques, even in NLP, there's a whole lot of things that a person can do, but each and every individual is different. So we need to address the needs of that particular person. So everything that I do is customized for my particular client that I have at that point in time.
and so if you're listening to this now and you're listening to Keyosha right now, I mean, I think Keyosha, you're living proof that it's absolutely possible to not only overcome trauma, and again, trauma can come in a wide variety of forms, an assault,
Definitely.
military experience, which is a common one we hear about. Um, Gosh, there's all kinds of different forms and variations.
Forms, yes.
For me, like a divorce, for example, but it's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely possible to overcome it. And I like what you've hinted on a couple times. The past you does not equal the future you. I know there's a lot of coaches out there that have said that, but it's so true. Who you are in the past, the trauma version of you, is not who you have to be in the future. So Keyosha, you said in the beginning you created a future vision of you, who you wanted to be, and I think that's such a key part of this. You've got to create that vision of who you want to be.
Yes, definitely, Brad. And I find that in that process, because with trauma, it's also generational. There's a saying where they say that the abused becomes the abuser. So you need to break the generational curse and say that, what, it ends with me. Just because my parents abused me, just because somebody raped me, just because I experienced divorce, I'm not going to bleed on other people and also cause them pain, because the fact is that whatever we go through, nobody deserves it. So just because I went through it doesn't mean that I have to put someone else through it, because really nobody deserves trauma in any way or form. And unfortunately, it's also not something that you can avoid, because it happens to all of us in many different forms. Like you say, it
Yeah.
happens to all of us at any given point in time. It doesn't give us a date and time to say today you will experience trauma, it just happens to us. And in the same way that trauma just happens to us, you can make that decision to say that, yes, it happened, but I can also make things happen for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know, Kiyosha, you are a trauma recovery coach. How, if someone listening here wants to get in touch with you or something like that, how can they do that?
They can reach me on my profile, Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook.
Okay.
It's Keyosha Duarte. Is my profile. They can just drop me an inbox, and I will definitely respond. I do respond to everybody.
Kiyosha,
Okay.
so you've said a lot of good stuff today, and I know we're kind of getting to the end of this here, but is there anything else that you would like to say and to offer with regards to overcoming trauma that you haven't said already?
Yes, one of the things that I definitely do want to say is that, many times people are afraid to seek help because they believe that it's not possible to get healing, and they start accepting, the situation as it is. But help is available, and it's definitely possible to get healing from your trauma. It doesn't have to become a way of life for you.
Absolutely, that is so key. For anyone listening, it does not have to become a way of life for you. And Kosha, I don't know if you've heard this before, but one of the best things that I ever heard with regards to overcoming trauma and to move on with your life, and even to some degree seek revenge if that's a motive that people have. But one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was that the way you deal with trauma and to overcome trauma is to go out and live your best life. Go out and be the best
Yes,
version of you that you
of
can
yourself.
be.
Mhm.
And Kyosha, you have obviously done that. So that seems to be like the magic pathway to overcoming PTSD is to, like you said in
Definitely.
the beginning, to choose to heal. Healing is a choice. So choose to
It's a
heal,
choice.
choose to move on, and choose to become the best version of you.
Definitely, Brad. In a nutshell, that is definitely what it is all about. And many people have proven that, it is possible to become that better version of yourself. And you'll be quite surprised, where life takes you once you take that decision to heal.
It's all about making that decision. Yeah. And Kiyosha, you've been a shining example of this. So thank you for being here today and sharing your story. And on behalf of your daughter, thank you for transforming and raising a wonderful young lady, because now she can see the
Oh,
real you, the true you, the authentic you. Again, if you're listening
thank you
here,
so much.
definitely appreciate you being here. As I always like to say, if you've gotten anything out of this episode, please share it with your friends and family as far and wide as possible. Wherever you do listen to podcasts, hit that subscribe button and leave me a 5-star review. I will put all the contact information for Kiyosha in the podcast notes. If you do have an experience with trauma or are still working to recover from trauma or overcome trauma, Keyosha is a great one to reach out to and work with. Until next time, as I always like to say, this is Coach Brad. Be well, be safe, be happy, eat ice cream. Take care, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you next time.